There is absolutely no revenue responsibility in that question. Question number 2, Grant Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by all his statements?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, yes.
Waking up. Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
How did he get it so wrong in November 2014 when he advised farmers not to worry about the dairy price and that it would bottom out soon, given that he had been told in July that year that there was a 5-year global milk glut?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, how did the member get it so wrong when he thought he'd be the leader twice and lost?
Order. Order. I'll hear from Chris Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister at least has to make some attempt to get vaguely close to the question that was asked. That answer came nowhere near it.
Order. Remind members this is a point of order. It'll be heard in silence. Could the member please come?
The point that I was making, Mr Speaker, is the Prime Minister at least has to get somewhere near the question that was asked by the member. He didn't even come close to addressing, even addressing the question.
Speaker. I'll hear from the Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister responded to some very direct remarks made by Mr Robertson, and it simply serves to point out the vagaries of prediction.
No, I think on this occasion, order, on this occasion there must be some attempt to answer the question. I'm going to invite the member to repeat the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How did he get it so wrong in November 2014 when he advised farmers not to worry about the dairy price and that it would bottom out soon, given that he had been told in July that year that there was a 5-year global milk glut?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I remain of the view, as I did back then, that the long-term outlook and medium-term outlook for dairy is very strong. But as we always know, it's always possible to not be able to count and get your numbers wrong from time to time.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question. Order. Grant Robertson.
Doesn't he think farmers are owed a response from him to serious questions that is better than juvenile politicking when they are facing 44% of them defaulting on their loan and farm prices dropping by 40% by 2018?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, offering a serious view about what I think are the long-term prospects for dairy, which remain that you've got a global opportunity out there emerging in Asia and the changing markets, are very relevant. But if the member wants to now say that he is supporting the dairy farmers of New Zealand, here's a few suggestions. Vote for TPP, because by far the largest beneficiary is dairy. Reform the RMA, because that affects those farmers. Take a constructive view to a range of different issues around tax, and don't whack a massive ETS on farmers. So coming into this House and claiming that he's the friend of the farmer when he does everything he can to put them out of business isn't going to fool anyone.
Good question. Supplementary question.
Order. I'm just waiting for supplementary question. Grant Robertson.
Does he accept the Reserve Bank severe scenario for a payout of $4.10 above the current forecast? That would mean 44% of farmers defaulting on loans and farm prices dropping by 40% in 2018.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the member is actually misrepresenting the Reserve Bank. It says that if that was the payout under $4, and I point out that actually the total payout is still predicted to be above that $4.35, those loans would be non-performing. That's quite a lot different from defaulting.
Really? Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Grant Robertson.
Does he think that farmer shareholders should be satisfied in the performance of the Fonterra CEO?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I don't have any responsibility for the performance of Teo Spearings any more than he has any responsibility for the performance of Andrew Little.
How did that relate to the original question?
Supplementary question. Order. Order.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question. The Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Does the Prime Minister still stand by his previously publicly stated position of supporting the opening up of Fonterra to share trading on the NZX as a way of bringing outside equity into the company?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, those comments were made a long time ago, but what I did support is trading amongst farmers, and I think from what I can see it's worked pretty well.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Doesn't he think he should offer a view to farmers about the performance of the CEO of Fonterra, given Fonterra having a debt-to-equity gearing ratio of 49%, demanding 90-day terms from its suppliers so it's actually got some working capital, and changing its payout forecast 3 times in 7 weeks? Doesn't he think he owes it to farmers to say what he thinks about that performance?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's not my responsibility for whether Teo Spearings does a good job or not. I don't have that responsibility any more than I have the responsibility of whether a bank chief executive is doing a good job or the chief executive of Telecom is doing a good job.
Doesn't matter, eh?
Question number 3.